My middle son is the type of kid who hyperfixates on his interests pretty heavily. And right now, his entire world revolves around apes, snails, dinosaurs, and dragons. And every year, all of my kids get a birthday quilt and they get to pick the theme. And he wanted me to incorporate all 4 of these into his quilt this year. So, welcome to part 1 of what I am calling the Impossible Quilt. To start off, I decided this was going to be an applique quilt because his birthday is in just a month and I don't want to punish myself trying to piece all of these little characters together. So I started off stitching together a few sheets of white cotton fabric, and that's going to be my background for the quilt top. I'm using several sheets of freezer paper to create a template for myself to make this easier. This is going to have not only a dragon, but lots of different types of apes riding dinosaurs and snails, trying to get back to their ape castle past the dragon. So I just felt like making a template would be a lot easier to keep my characters more uniform throughout the process. Once I had drawn a general outline of everything that I wanted on this quilt, I went over it in red Sharpie just to help it stand out to me when I go to cut. The next step was to layer my fabric on top of some heat and bond because that's going to allow me to adhere it to my quilt top before I stitch it down permanently. So what I'm doing is laying heat and bond with the kind of bumpy side up that's going to adhere to the fabric and laying my fabric right sides up. I chose this Faraway Kingdom by Riley Blake. It has little dragons on it, and I thought that would be perfect for the dragon body. And so then on top of the fabric layer, I am laying my freezer paper drawing that I made with the shiny side of the freezer paper down, touching the fabric. And so when I go to iron all of those 3 layers together, they're going to stick together and make like a little applique sandwich. That way I can come in with my scissors and cut my shape out so that the fabric is cut to the shape of the dragon. And then the heat and bond is already adhered so that all I have to do is iron it down once it's cut out to my quilt top. And I did this in sections because I only had about a half yard of fabric for the dragon's body. And so obviously it wasn't going to be long enough to do one continuous cut for the dragon. The next step was to sew the pieces of the dragon's body together. You can just, adhere this to your quilt top and zigzag stitch the pieces together, but I wanted it to be more of a traditional quilting style for the body. So I'm just laying my pieces right sides together and sewing with a 1/4-inch seam allowance. Then I came and laid it on top of my quilt background and just kind of adjusted it with the template that I made for the wing until I got it into a position that I liked. The next step is to tear off the film from the heat and bond on the back of the dragon, which I did, and then I ironed it down onto the quilt top. The final step for getting the dragon's body permanently affixed to the quilt top so that I can start building everything around it is to stitch it down. I chose a blanket stitch because I really love the way it looks when doing applique. And I chose Aurifil 12 weight thread because it's thicker and so it's going to stand out more prominently when you're looking at it, which is exactly what I wanted. Here is how we are looking so far at the end of day 2. This is definitely one of those trust the process sort of projects, so stay tuned to see how it turns out. Here's the quilt so far. It's definitely a trust the process type of thing, so please follow along for more and to see how it turns out.